If you have been waiting for a full Weft install video from start to finish, then this is for you. I have had so many of you request a full install tutorial, so today I'm taking you through the entire process step by step so that you can see exactly how I do it behind the chair. We're going to go over sectioning, bead placement, stitching, anchor stitches, finishing stitches, all of those little details that make the biggest difference in how secure, flat, and seamless the final result looks. And because I know so many stylists and clients that still have questions about this method, I'm also going to answer some of the most searched questions about the weft extensions throughout this video. So whether they damage the hair, how long they last, who they're best for, and I'll also be teaching you how to make them look the most natural. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Sam and I have been doing hair extensions for over 13 years. I've been teaching for the past 5 and I have also taught for major brands. I'm a salon owner and I also work behind the chair 5 days a week. So everything that I'm sharing with you guys comes from real hands-on experience, real client results and years of teaching this stuff professionally. All right, so let's start with the most important thing, sectioning. Sectioning is so important when it comes to your wefts because this is going to determine where those wefts live for the duration of wear. So one thing that I've done first is I've actually sectioned off my last section because I want to know where I'm going to end it. So that is one thing that I've started to do and it makes such a big difference. So I do that final section and then from that I know where I want those wefts to lie. So section that off and now I know I'm going to have a row here, a row here, and then that will be my final row. And usually I'm gonna have about 1 inch in between my rows, especially because I'm working with a thicker, denser weft today. So I'm going in and using a machine weft. And with your machine weft, typically less is more. So usually I'm gonna be doing about 2 to 3 rows. Today for a full head, I'm gonna show you exactly how I would do it. And I would have a little small one at the nape, and then I'll have 2 longer ones above that. So let's start with that nape row. All right, so I'm gonna take my clip and I'm just gonna section off this hair here so it's out the way. And I'm sectioning off just behind the ear. And I'll do the same on the other side. Section that off because I want everything to be nice and clean, just so it's not in my way. Once that's done, then I can start that nape row. So my nape row is going to sit about 1 inch above the nape and it's just going to be 1 straight row across. So 1 inch above the nape, 1 straight row across. Once I'm happy with that sectioning, I'm just going to take the clip and I'll clip the rest of that hair out the way because I don't need to worry about that right now because we're not working on any other rows. And then I'm going to take my hairspray. So this hairspray is by Sexy Hair and it's called So Touchable. So it's a really lightweight hairspray and I just spray that. So then I can go and make sure I don't have any little crosshairs in there. And then once I'm happy with everything, I'll just do a cross check, make sure it all looks good. And then once I'm happy with that, I can begin beading. So with this row, again, you're always going to make sure that you're working 1 inch away from the hairline here. So this row is going to sit like that at the nape and it just helps create really nice coverage right from the get-go. All right, now I have got my beads threaded. So let's go in and start our beaded foundation. So I'm starting in the middle. However, you don't have to, you can start here, work yourself here, start here, work yourself here, whatever works for you. It's all gonna look the same at the end of the day. And then for my section, I'm dropping down about 1/4 of an inch. And then the width of the section is gonna be the width of my thumb. Then I'm gonna take my looper tool and just slide that bead straight on. So the foundation and the way I do those beading, it's going to be exactly the same as the way I bead every other foundation. So nothing different, nothing new. That's the nice thing about weft. I feel like it's very fluid and a lot of the steps will apply regardless on what kind of weft you're using. So I'm just going to power through this foundation so that we can get straight into the good bit, which is how to stitch on that first row. Okay, so that is my first row beaded. Just going to do a little cross check, make sure that everything is nice and covered. And now I can go in and measure out my weft to the size of that foundation. So like I mentioned earlier, this is that standard weft, so a machine weft. And the nice thing is about this is you can cut it to the size. So all I'm going to do now is just take it and I'm just going to measure it out here, and then I'll cut it to the size of my foundation. The nice thing is about these, I feel like it takes like half the time that it does to sew in a Genius weft, because you're not having to stack and layer anything. Everything is already done when it comes to those machine wefts. So all you have to do is just cut it, pin it, sew it. Really, really easy. So I'm going to take my thread. I am using red thread purely so that you can see those stitches. And what I'll do is for my nape row, I'll do 1 wingspan of thread. Then I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to thread that thread through my needle. And then I'm going to split that thread into 2 like that. So then now my needle is going to be hanging down at the bottom here. And then I'll take these 2 pieces, line them up together, and then I'm just going to do a triple knot to secure it. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and I'll bring those 2 little pieces through. Whenever I'm working with a machine weft, where that spine is thicker, I feel like you need a little bit extra support. So sometimes my go-to for that is going to be that double thread rather than a single thread. So I tend to use that single thread more when I'm working with a hand-tied or a Genius weft. But when I'm working with any sort of machine wefting, my preference is going to be that double thread. Just gives a little bit more security. So now I'm going to make sure everything is straight. I don't have any twists or tangles. And we're going to start by sewing through the spine of the weft, and then that way we can then go in and anchor it onto the foundation. All right, so I'm going to start an inch in here, and I'm just going to pierce the back of that weft here, and then we'll pull that through because we want that knot to live on the inside of the weft. Then I'm going to just do a little loop-de-loop around the top of that weft until we reach the final part here. So these little loops just create a little bit of security, and it just helps to secure and adhere that thread onto the spine of the weft. The nice thing about your machine wefting is you can pierce through the spine and nothing's going to happen. All right, so how do you anchor your weft? Let's get into our anchoring. All right, so now for that first stitch, we are going to drop our needle down straight through that first pocket of hair, and we're going to pierce the spine of the weft and just pull that through. Then I'm going to take my needle, and now we'll go up again, still staying in that first pocket of hair, and then we'll just pierce the back of the weft one more time and pull that through to secure. Then you have a really nice secure stitch that is just going to live on the corner of that weft to stop anything from flipping up. I feel like with most clients, it's going to be those corners that will drive them crazy. So it's really important, especially with machine wefting, to make sure they're nice and secure. Then, super easy, all we're going to do is go into our blanket stitches. So going into that second pocket now, dropping my needle down under the spine of the weft, because now we're not piercing through the spine of the weft, we're just going under the spine. The only time you're going to pierce through the weft is at those anchoring points. And now I'm just going to do blanket stitches all the way until we reach the other side. Super easy. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know that these blanket stitches never change. So blanket stitches are going to be the same regardless of what type of wefting you use, so makes it really nice and easy. So now we're doing blanket stitches, and each of your blanket stitch is going to go down through that pocket of hair underneath the spine of the weft, and making sure you pull up to secure, because you want those blanket stitches to sit nice and clean and on top of the spine of the weft like this. If you are curious to know where these stitches are living without the weft blocking it, I've got a really good video and it's called Skeleton Stitches, and that is going to show you and guide you through where those stitches live. So if you're kind of a little bit confused, then definitely give that video a watch because it will make so much more sense. All right, so now I can see that this weft is a little bit longer. Ideally, you want that weft to end where your foundation ends. So for that reason, I'm just going to trim off that excess wefting. Otherwise, it's going to stick out and annoy my client. All right, so let's anchor this now. So one thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring my thread all the way forward here. So I'm just going to pierce the back of the weft like that. That way it gives me a really nice starting point for that anchor. So now I'm going to do the same as what I did on the other side. Drop my needle down through that first pocket, pierce the back of the weft, and then I'll pull that stitch through. And then I'm going to go up through that pocket, pierce the back of the weft, and I'll pull that stitch through. There we go, nice and secure. And then now I'm just going to do the same thing that I did when we started. We'll just do those little loop-de-loops just around the top of that weft, bringing it back about an inch. And now on that third one, I'm going to do that triple knot. So triple knot, you go 1, 2, 3, wrap it around that needle 3 times, and then you just pull it up to secure. Then I'm just going to drop that behind the spine of the weft like that, just so that I'm pulling that weft, that knot back. I don't want that knot to sit on top of the spine of the weft, otherwise it's going to annoy the client. So I pull that behind. Then I'm just going to cut the thread so that I'm cutting my needle off the thread. And these 2 loose pieces, I'm just going to tie 3 times to make sure that everything, again, nice and secure. We don't want anything coming undone. So I'm just going to tie it now, 1, 2, and 3. And then I'll just go in with my little cutters and trim off the excess thread. And there you have it. That is that first row installed. So easy and quick. And if you're curious, this is what it looks like underneath. So now your second row is going to be 1 inch above from this first row. So it's going to sit here. So now I'll start carving out that row. And now it's going to begin to curve around and sit above the ear on our client. So that's how we create coverage around the front. And I'm just going to spin her around, and we'll do the exact same thing on this part of the head, making sure that our sections line up. Once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to spray and just clean everything up so it's nice and clean. And then just for reference, because I know you're going to ask me where this row sits, it sits 1 inch above that client's ear, so 1 inch above. If they have really, really fine hair, again, like what we spoke about, density is going to determine where you place those rows. So if they have really fine density, you might even want to work a little bit higher up the ear, because if you don't and they wear their hair up, then you have more of a chance of that weft showing through. So always bear in mind their density. That's going to help you determine how high or how low you place that weft. But on average, it's going to be about 1 inch above that ear. All right, round 2, beaded foundation for row number 2. Everything exactly the same like I spoke about before. So I don't want to bore you with the beaded foundation, because I feel like if you've watched my videos before, then you'll know all about it. I think the number one thing with your beaded foundation is to make sure that everything is nice and clean and that you don't have any crosshairs and you're not creating tension. So by that I mean you're not bringing up that bead too high up and you're not clamping it down too tightly. You want to make sure that you allow for movement within the install so that when they wear their hair up, you have a little bit of wiggle room in between. I feel like that leads us really nicely onto one of the most asked questions I get asked when it comes to weft, and that is, are weft hair extensions damaging? And I always tell people, yes, they can be. And the reason that they can be damaging is because if someone does that beaded foundation too tight, then of course it's going to cause a lot of tension. And tension within hair extensions is always going to be that #1 cause of damage. So it's really important that we are not creating tension, and that as we go through, we're making sure with our client that everything feels nice and secure, but not tight to the point where it's painful. You don't want your client to go away and have a headache. Another question that when we were looking at questions that people ask was why education matters specifically with weft hair extensions. And I think education is so important just in general in the hair world, whether you're a colorist or you cut or you do other methods of extensions. I feel like education is so important because you have to know not only how to install them, but how to maintain them, how to install them in a way that is going to be beneficial for your client, how to install them in a way where you're not going to create damage, it's going to be comfortable. The whole point of hair extensions is that they should make you feel your best, but when you take them out, it shouldn't make your hair look even worse than what it was when you put them in. So I think that's why education is so important, to make sure that you are getting the best out of this method. And the only way that you're going to get the best out of the method and do the best install is by educating yourself on all the different ways that you can install it safely and correctly. So what we'll do now is we'll just skip through this and come to the end of when I've finished this foundation so that you can see how that looks, and we'll go straight into our wefting. All right, so that is my foundation, my beaded foundation done for the second row. So let me show you where it's going to live. So it is now going to be 1 inch away from the hairline here. Again, if they have really low density, really fine hair, you might even want to set it back a little bit further and maybe have an end here. However, this mannequin head, she's got pretty good density, so I'm doing it 1 inch away from that hairline, and then exactly the same on this side, 1 inch away from the hairline. And again, like what I said before, this is really quick and easy to do because you're not having to stack and layer anything. Everything is already stacked and layered for you. Okay, once I have that secured, then I can go in and begin stitching. Anchor stitch, exactly the same as what we did in that first row. We are piercing the back of the weft about 1 inch through, and then we're just bringing that thread all the way through. And then I'm gonna do my little loop-de-loop around the top of that weft. I always hold the thread in this hand as well, because if you don't hold it, then again, it's more inclined to tangle up on itself. So I always try and hold the thread as I'm bringing it through, just to prevent tangling. All right, now that that is done, let's do that anchor stitch. So now we are anchoring our weft onto our foundation. So we're dropping the needle down through that first pocket, and we are piercing the back of that weft, bringing that through, and then that stitch is going to sit on top of the weft like that. Then we're going to go up through that first pocket still, and again we are piercing the back of the weft. Now into those blanket stitches, so easy, down through that pocket, and now we're just going under the weft. We're not piercing it anymore. The only time that we pierce through that weft is at those anchoring points, but now the rest of the time we're just going under that weft. Another question that I feel like so many people asked me in the consultations and then also in the comment section on here is if weft hair extensions are good for fine hair. And honestly, I think they are. You just have to determine what type of weft you're using. So for example, this type of weft, this machine wefting, usually I use it exclusively for those higher density clients. So anyone with like medium to thick density, your machine weft is going to work really well for, because you're able to build really good coverage very quickly. rather than with your low density clients, they don't need that much density because they don't have that much hair to start with. So for someone like that, I do use weft on them. However, I prefer to use something like a Genius weft or a hand tied. Honestly, my go-to weft that I use pretty much every single day in the salon is going to be that Genius weft, and that is the weft that I can use on every single density, including clients with finer hair. I constantly get people coming in for consultations who have worn weft hair extensions and totally hated them. And I do feel like a lot of the time the reason that they don't like them could be to do with placement, could be to do with the type of foundation that's being used, and it could even be down to the type of wefting that's being used. So what you are going to notice about your machine weft is a lot of the time they will have return hair. So for example, this one has return hair. What return hair is all these little short hairs here. Can you see those? So those short hairs make it feel a little bit bulkier at that point of attachment, especially more so than a Genius weft. And they can also be itchy for some clients, especially if they're really tender-headed. Those little return hairs are so annoying. So I think that could also be why they have a bad reputation. If you do want to use like a machine wefting, you want that thickness, you don't want to use a Genius weft, then what I advise you to do is definitely look into Covey. So Covey, not only do they sell Genius wefts, they also sell what's called a volume Genius weft. A volume Genius weft is literally like what you see here. You have this incredible density, incredible coverage, but you don't have this horrible return hair at the top. Another thing that you're going to notice about the spine of your volume Genius is that spine is so much nicer. So if you're curious to see how that looks, then definitely check out my other video, because I do have a video on that Covey Volume Genius Weft install. And again, if I am using any sort of volume weft, I'm always going to be using that. That is my preferred machine weft. My top two wefts are definitely going to be those Covey Volume Genius and the Covey Genius. Okay, we are coming towards the end of our install of this row, and immediately you can just see how quick these are to install. That's why I love them. They're quick, they're easy. Usually I can do a full head of these in about 45 minutes to an hour, which is nice. So I'm going to do one final blanket stitch here, and then before I do anything else, let me just go in and make sure that my thread isn't tangled, and if it is, I can just untangle it like that. I also feel like this is teeny tiny bit long, so I'll just trim it off ever so slightly. There we go. And then I'll do exactly what I did on that other row. Just gonna bring my needle towards the end here, piercing through that spine of the weft. And then again, it just gives me a really nice starting point to finish. So now let's anchor that down through that pocket, piercing the back of the weft, and then we're just going to do that one more time, but this side, this time we go up through the pocket here and then piercing the back of the weft one more time, and I just guide that through here. Perfect. And then we'll just finish off with those little stitches on top. So you can see it all follows that same pattern. So once you've done one row, all you're doing after that is just copying and pasting. And then now 1 inch back on ourselves, pierce the back of the weft, and let's do that triple knot. 1, 2, 3, pulling that up. And then we'll drop that needle down behind the spine of the weft, so that that knot lives behind. Trim off the excess thread. And then let's just tie this thread 3 times to make sure that it is nice and secure. So we're gonna go 1 and 2 and 3. Fabulous. Let's trim off the excess thread. There's that second row complete. Nearly there. Okay, that is that second row finished. So now let's do our third and final row. And if you're following along with your own mannequin head, you'll find this one even easier because it's everything the same. So now you'll see with your weft extensions, all it is now is just repeat. So do exactly what you did before, just repeat it. And I feel like the more you do it, the quicker you get, the better your installs are going to look, and then the more comfortable they're going to feel for your clients. So now for this, my beading is going to be exactly the same as before. So we'll skip to it and we'll go straight to those stitches. Okie doke. Third and final row, anchoring exactly the same, 1 inch in, and I'm just going to pierce the spine of that weft. So all we're doing is just the same thing as we did before. And you can even do this off the head as well. So if you find it easier, you can even do all of these starting stitches like this off the head, and then that way it's one less thing for you to do on your client. Now that I've done that, I'm gonna go down through that first pocket, like so, pierce the back of the weft, and now we're gonna go up through that first pocket, pierce the back of the weft, and again, just pulling that through. Nice and secure. And then same thing as before, blanket stitches. All right, let's do another question that I get asked a lot. Can you wear your hair up when you have weft extensions? Yes, absolutely. You can wear it up. Bear in mind your movement in a weft is definitely a little bit limited, especially if you're working with a machine weft. So your movement is going to be up, down, as opposed to with an individual, you're going to have 360 degree. So with a weft, especially this kind of machine wefting where it's a little bit thicker, your movement is 180 degrees. So up, down. So you can wear low ponytails and you can wear high ponytails, but I would say avoid any sort of mid style, especially those little slicked back ponies or buns, because if you do that, you are going to create a lot of tension on these anchoring points. So something to bear in mind, but you can definitely wear your hair up, and you should be able to. If you struggle wearing your hair up with the weft, then it could be to do with placement. So have your stylist adjust it if you feel like you're struggling. All right, how long do weft hair extensions last? So from that initial install, what you're then going to do is you will then come in every 4 to 6 weeks for a move up. So your move up is just where you push that bead up into place. I've got loads of videos on that move up appointment. Usually you're going to do that 1 to 2 times. And then after those 2 move ups, you're going to come in for a reinstall. So your reinstall is probably going to be at the 12 to 18-week mark, and when you reinstall the weft, you are still using that same hair. Usually I can get about 3 reinstalls out of that weft hair, and it, you know, it all depends on how that client's looking after it, but I would say that lifespan could be anywhere between 6, 9, even 12 months if you're buying really high quality hair. So for example, I pretty much exclusively use Covey hair now. And with your Covey hair, I definitely get closer to the 9 to 12 months out of it, which is fantastic. It's a really good investment for my clients. Something that I've been finding a lot is I will have clients that have weft hair extensions, and recently they've been having to do MRI scans, CT scans, and a lot of the time with these scans, they will actually ask you to take your weft hair extensions out. Not necessarily keratins, but the reason that they might ask you to take out your weft is because the beads that we're using, even though they're not magnetic, they are metal. So for that reason, sometimes they could interfere with that reading. So something to bear in mind, if you know that you have to have one of these scans done, then definitely take them out before that scan. You wouldn't want to run into any problems. Somebody asked me in the comments how to avoid that tangling happen. Can you see my threads getting all tangled? And all you have to do is just make sure that you are untangling that thread. And if you do that throughout as you go, then you're going to avoid those tangles from happening. So top tip from me on how to avoid a tangly mess, because it's always the worst when you come towards the end and you realize that you've got an absolute mess on your hands with your thread. Okay, we are coming into our anchor. I think the anchor is definitely one of the most important aspects of the weft, because if you ever have people struggle previously with their weft install, a lot of the time it's those anchoring points. So that's why I've been showing you every single anchor that I do. Let's just trim off this weft. Got lots of little pieces for my comb line. Okay, the final anchor. We are piercing through the spine of the weft here, bringing that thread all the way to the end. And then we are dropping that needle down through that last pocket, piercing the back of the weft, and then just pulling that up to secure. Now that I've done that, I'm then gonna go up through that last pocket, and then again, we are just piercing the back of that weft through the spine and just pulling and guiding that little anchor through. Once I'm happy, I just go into those little loop-de-loops that I've been doing, and we're about to finish off. Before I finish this install, you always ask what thread I like to use. I like nylon thread, and my nylon thread I usually buy from L Pro Hair Extensions. And you can use my code, it is SamHines10, so you'll get 10% off that nylon thread. That's my favorite because I feel like it's definitely stronger than your cotton. All right, we're at the end. Let's do that little triple knot. 1, 2, 3, pulling that through to secure, making sure I don't have any crosshairs in there, pulling up, and then we'll just drop that behind the spine of the weft, cut off the excess thread, and then we'll tie this 3 times. Exactly the same as what we've been doing on every single row. I really hope you guys find these videos helpful. Definitely make them cater towards what I find I'm getting asked in the comments. But then if you do want more detailed education, don't forget I do have that members only page on here. And with your members only page, it is exclusive content that is super duper detailed. All right. We're done. That's it. That is our 3rd and final row and our weft install. And look at that. She has got so much hair now. It is so nice and full. I love it. Okay everyone, so that is the full weft install from start to finish. I really wanted to make this video because so many of you requested that full install. So I hope that it really helped you by seeing the full process, and it helps you better understand not just how to do the method, but why those small details matter so much when it comes to comfort, longevity, and also at seamless final result. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you want to see next. If there's another full install, or maybe a move up or a removal or a troubleshooting video or any sort of comparison video you want me to film, leave your suggestions down below, because a lot of my content comes directly from your requests. Actually, all of my content comes from your requests. And again, if you want more in-depth education, don't forget to check out my YouTube members section. And then again, if you want to shop my favorite tools and products, my Amazon storefront is linked in the description. The hair I'm using is Covey. I don't have a discount code, unfortunately, but I do have one for Hair Made Easy and L Pro Hair, and that is SamHines10. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap!